I was sitting in the break room at the Veterans Affairs office in Boise, Idaho, eating a sandwich I hadn't tasted, when my cell phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. A 208 area code, local, but not saved. I almost didn't answer. I had a meeting in 11 minutes, and the sandwich was already a lost cause. "Is this Leonard?" The voice was a woman's. Mid-40s, maybe. Measured. The kind of voice that had learned to deliver difficult news slowly. "It is," I said. "My name is Paula Reyes. I'm the contractor your son hired to renovate the bathroom in your late father's house on Orchard Rim Road." She paused. "I'm sorry to call you at work, sir, but I need you to come to the house, today if you can, and I'd prefer you come by yourself." I remember exactly what I was looking at when she said that. A laminated poster on the break room wall about hand-washing compliance. Everything in the room was the same as it had been 30 seconds before. And then it wasn't. "My name is Leonard Marsh. I'm 53 years old. I work in benefits coordination for the VA and have for 21 years. I live in a duplex on the east side of Boise with a dog named Pepper and a half-finished deck I've been meaning to complete since 2019. My father, Roy Marsh, passed away 8 months before that phone call. He had been 78. The doctor said it was congestive heart failure, which had been building quietly for years, the kind of thing that announces itself in small ways long before it becomes the thing that announces itself in small ways long before it becomes the thing that ends you. He had lived alone in the house on Orchard Rim Road since my mother passed in 2016. He had been stubborn about it, and I had not pushed hard enough on the subject of assisted living, and I have made my peace with that, or at least I have tried to. After he passed, my younger brother, Derek, and I became co-executors of the estate. The house needed work before I could sell it. My father had not been a man who called repairmen easily or often. He had fixed things himself until he couldn't, and then they had stayed broken. The upstairs bathroom was the worst of it. The tile around the tub had been separating from the wall for at least 2 years, and there was water damage behind it that we hadn't understood the extent of until we pulled back the panel. My son Eli, who is 27 and does property work on the side, had connected us with Paula Reyes, who ran a small renovation crew out of Nampa and came with good references. I had met her once, walked her through the scope of the job, and given her a key. That was 3 weeks before she called me. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency and left. I drove the 14 minutes to Orchard Rim Road with the radio off, which is not something I normally do. Paula's truck was in the driveway, and she was standing on the porch when I pulled in. She was a compact woman with gray streaked hair pulled back tight and paint on her forearms. She waited for me to walk up before she spoke. "I want to show you something before I try to explain it," she said, "because I don't think my explanation is going to do it justice." She led me inside, through the kitchen that still smelled faintly of my father's coffee, and up the stairs. The bathroom was gutted. The tub was still there, but the surrounding tile had been fully removed, the drywall behind it stripped back to the studs. Paula walked me to the far corner, the one that backed against the interior wall of my father's bedroom closet. "We pulled the drywall this morning," she said. She pointed at the gap between 2 studs, low and to the left, just above the floor joist. That was in there. It was a fireproof document bag, the kind you can buy at any office supply store, rectangular with a zipper closure and a small padlock looped through the zipper pull. Gray, maybe 12 inches by 9. It had been set on a small shelf bracket screwed directly into the stud, not wedged or slid in carelessly, but positioned deliberately, like something placed on a shelf. "I haven't touched it," Paula said. "I just backed out of the room and called you." I knew what the padlock combination would be before I consciously thought about it. My father used the same 4 digits on everything. His birthday, not a sophisticated choice, but he was a man who believed the lock was for honest people and not much else. I crouched down, opened it. Inside, a thumb drive in a small Ziploc bag, a manila envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting, and beneath both of those, a spiral-bound notebook, the narrow kind, the size of a shirt pocket, with a red cover. My father had kept notebooks like that his whole life. Shopping lists, phone numbers, things he didn't want to forget. I had assumed most of them were for groceries. I sat back on my heels in the gutted bathroom for a long moment. "You all right?" Paula said. I told her I genuinely didn't know. I asked her to give me an hour. She took her crew to lunch and left me the house. I brought the document bag down to the kitchen table, made a cup of coffee on my father's old machine, the one I hadn't had the heart to throw out, and sat down across from it the way you sit across from something you already know is going to change things. I opened the notebook first. My father's handwriting was large and slightly cramped, the letters of a man who'd learned to write in the 1950s and never updated his style. The early pages were dated and brief. The first entry I could find was from 2 years and 4 months before he died. Spoke to Darnell today, brought up the CD accounts again. Said the rates were better if we moved them. I said I'd think about it. Something felt off. Couldn't say what. Darnell Pruitt had been my father's financial advisor for 9 years. He worked out of an independent firm in Meridian, about a 20-minute drive from Orchard Rim Road. My father had been referred to him by a friend from his old bowling league, someone he trusted, and he had continued using Darnell because things had seemed fine, and my father was not a man who changed arrangements once they were in place. I turned the page. Moved the CDs like Darnell suggested, $31,000. He said the new account would earn better and that he'd handle the paperwork. I asked for copies. He said he'd mail them. It's been 3 weeks, no copies. The next entry was 2 weeks after that. Called the office. Receptionist said copies were in the mail. Still nothing. Called again. Darnell called back himself this time. Said there was a processing delay with the new institution. Told me not to worry. I wrote down the time I called and what he said. I had to stop reading. I got up and walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard, at the raised garden beds my father had built in his 70s and still managed to plant every spring until the last one. Then I went back to the table. My father had been tracking something for 2 years and had never said a word to either of his sons. The notebook got more detailed as it went. Over the following months, he had identified what he believed were 4 separate instances of money being moved without his explicit consent. The amounts ranged from $11,000 to just over $40,000. The explanations Darnell had given him each time varied: portfolio restructuring, a rate lock opportunity, and administrative correction. But they shared a quality my father had noted in the margin of one entry with 3 underlines. None of these are things he showed me paperwork for afterward. The total my father had calculated by the time the notebook entries became more sporadic was somewhere north of $95,000. But that was not the part that made me have to set the notebook down a second time. About 2/3 through, the entries changed. Noticed the dizziness again this morning. 3rd time this week. Dr. Sixterb, Aaron says it's my blood pressure medication, that we may need to adjust the dose. I've been on the same dose for 4 years. Why now? And then 3 entries later, in handwriting that was slightly larger than usual, as if written more carefully or with more deliberate effort. Darnell brought me a bottle of a supplement at our meeting in February. Said his own father swore by it. CoQ10 and something else I can't pronounce. He said it was good for heart function in older men. I have been taking it since February. I remembered the supplement. I had seen the bottle on my father's kitchen windowsill the last few times I visited. A dark, amber bottle. No brand I recognized. I had asked him about it once, and he had said it was something his advisor had recommended, that it was supposed to help with energy. I had not thought much about it. My father was 76 at the time, and men of 76 take supplements. I turned the pages faster now, looked up the supplement online. Can't find the brand. Called the number on the bottle. Number doesn't work. Wrote it down 3 times to make sure I dialed it right. Disconnected. And then, in an entry dated about 5 months before he died, I don't think I should keep taking these, but I want to know first. I'm going to save a few capsules and see if the boy's doctor friend can tell me what's in them. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, I need to know for sure before I say anything. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything I can't prove. He had not called the boy's doctor friend. I know this because our boy's doctor friend is my college roommate Gareth, who is a GP in Twin Falls, and who has had no contact with my father in at least 3 years. Whatever my father had intended to do with that information, he had not gotten there. Midway through the last third of the notebook, there was a single entry that I read 3 times before I could move past it. I think Derek knows something about the accounts. Don't know how much. I saw a text on his phone by accident last spring. His screen was facing up on my kitchen table, and I wasn't trying to read it, but I did. It was from Darnell. It said, "Your dad asked about the paperwork again?" Derek texted back, "I'll handle it." I asked Derek about it the same day, and he said it was nothing. That Darnell had just asked him to remind me about some form. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to be wrong about my own son. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after I read that. Derek is 49. He lives in Nampa, 12 minutes from our father's house. He had been the one who organized most of the visits in those last 2 years. He'd taken my father to most of his doctor's appointments after the heart diagnosis. He had been the one who called me when our father went to the hospital the last time. He had spoken at the funeral. I picked up the manila envelope and opened it. It was 4 pages, handwritten, and it began without preamble, the way my father did most things. "Leonard, if you're reading this, you found it. I knew you'd be the one to find it if anyone did. You were always the one who went through the details. My father was not a sentimental man. He did not write the way people write in movies. What followed was methodical and careful, and nearly without emotion, which made it harder to read, not easier. He laid out what he knew. The accounts, the transfers, the dates, the amounts. He explained that he had become suspicious of the supplement, but had not had it tested. He explained that he had not gone to the police because he did not have enough to take to them yet, and because he had been sick, and because he had been afraid of what an investigation might uncover about Derek. The relevant paragraph read, "I have not been able to prove that Derek is involved. I want to be careful about that. It may be nothing. It may be that Darnell approached him separately and Derek did something foolish that he believed was small. People do foolish things when someone they trust makes it sound easy and harmless. I am not ready to believe my son intended for me to be harmed, but I am not able to fully disbelieve it either. That is the hardest sentence I have ever had to write." The last page ended with this. "The supplement bottle is in the back of the cabinet above the refrigerator, behind the canning jars. There are 6 capsules left in it. Please have them tested by someone who knows what they're looking at. Take the notebook and the thumb drive to a lawyer before you do anything else. Do not go to Darnell alone. Do not confront Derek before you know what you know. And don't let this make you stop trusting people. I raised you to be open-handed. Stay that way. Just be less naive about it than I was." That last line sounded exactly like him. Right down to the mild criticism. I found the supplement bottle where he said it would be. I stood on a step stool and moved the canning jars one at a time until I felt it at the back of the shelf. 6 capsules still inside. The label was handwritten with a marker, not printed, which I had not registered when I'd seen it on the windowsill. A dark marker on a white adhesive label. No brand, no manufacturer. A phone number that I confirmed, standing in my father's kitchen, was disconnected. I did not call Derek. I want to be direct about that, because the impulse was there and it was strong. I am his older brother by 4 years. I know what his face looks like when he's lying. I wanted to see it. I am glad I didn't. Instead, I called Gareth in Twin Falls. I told him I had a supplement bottle from my father's cabinet with no verifiable manufacturer, that my father had been taking it for 9 or 10 months before he died, and that I was concerned about what might be in it. Gareth asked me a series of questions and then said, "Leonard, don't let anyone else touch that bottle. I'm going to give you the name of someone at the university lab in Moscow. Drive it up there yourself." I drove to Moscow, Idaho the next morning. The drive is about 2 hours through the Palouse. I spent most of it not listening to the radio. Before I drove to Moscow, I had called an attorney. A woman named Ruth Ellison, who had been recommended to me by a colleague at the VA. A woman who handled civil litigation and had done some estate work. I reached her on a Thursday evening and I told her everything, all of it, from Paula's phone call forward. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Leonard, do not move any of the financial documents. Do not make copies before I see the originals. Do not call Darnell, and absolutely do not talk to your brother until we've had a chance to sit down. I met with Ruth the following Monday. She had connections I didn't, and she moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, she was in contact with a detective at the Ada County Sheriff's Office, a man named Detective Hirsch who worked financial crimes. He reviewed the notebook, the documents from the thumb drive, and the contents of the bag. The thumb drive, it turned out, contained something I had not expected: a scanned copy of the original investment agreement my father had signed 9 years ago, and alongside it, a photocopy of a version of the same agreement that Darnell had apparently provided during a review meeting 3 years in. The documents were not identical. 3 clauses in the second version did not appear in the first. One of them gave the advisor discretionary authority over transfers up to $50,000 without requiring client signature on individual transactions. My father had circled that clause in red ink and written in the margin, "I never agreed to this." Detective Hirsch sent the supplement capsules to a toxicology lab in Portland. He was experienced enough to know that the county lab would not have the equipment for what he suspected they were looking for. The results came back 6 weeks later. The capsules contained, among other things, a compound called aconitine. It is derived from a plant called monkshood, which grows wild in parts of the American West and is toxic in very small and sustained amounts. Prolonged ingestion at low doses causes cardiac irregularities, fatigue, dizziness, and in individuals with existing heart vulnerability can accelerate deterioration in ways that a general practitioner would likely attribute to the progression of natural heart disease. My father had had a mild cardiac diagnosis when he began taking the capsules. He had not had a severe one. By the time he died, he did. He had been 78. No one had asked too many questions. Darnell Pruitt was arrested on a Tuesday morning in November. The charges included wire fraud, theft of funds from an elderly person, and financial elder abuse, which is a specific charge under Idaho law that carries enhanced penalties. After the toxicology results came in, the Ada County prosecutor opened a separate investigation into the capsules. That investigation took an additional 7 months. The criminal negligence charge was filed. Unlike the video that might present this cleanly, I will tell you that it is not resolved cleanly. The prosecution is ongoing as I write this. Ruth has told me what she can. The standard of proof for what they're alleging is high, and proving intent through the mechanism of an untraceable supplement is not simple. I understand that. I have had time to sit with the difference between what I know happened and what a jury will be asked to determine, and they are not always the same thing. What the financial investigation revealed more quickly was the extent of what had been taken. The total, once forensic accountants had reviewed the records, was just over $112,000. Most of it had moved through a series of transfers that terminated in 2 places, accounts connected to Darnell's personal holdings, and a series of smaller deposits into an account belonging to my brother. Derek's deposits were smaller, irregular, amounts between $8,000, spaced weeks apart over the same 18-month period, during which my father had been getting sicker. When the detective confronted him with the records, Derek did not deny receiving the money. He said that Darnell had told him it was a referral arrangement, that Derek had initially connected them, and that Darnell had begun paying him a finder's fee retroactively. Derek said he had not known the money was stolen. He said he had asked Darnell once where it came from, and Darnell had told him it was standard industry practice and that Derek shouldn't worry about it. He said he had told himself that. He said he had wanted to believe it. My brother is not a stupid man. Whether he convinced himself of something he needed to believe, or whether he understood more than he has said and made a calculation, I genuinely don't know. I have thought about it more than I have thought about almost anything else in the past year and a half. Derek was charged with misprision of a felony, which is the federal charge for knowingly concealing a felony without reporting it. He cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced charge. He testified about his communications with Darnell and provided text records that were significant to the case. I have not spoken to my brother since the week of his arrest. I don't say that with rage. The rage came and went in the first few months and left behind something quieter and harder to name. What I have now is more like a door I don't know how to open. Derek held my father's hand in the hospital. He helped me sort through the house after. He sat across from me at Thanksgiving tables for 49 years. Whether what he did constitutes a betrayal in the full sense of the word, or something smaller and more cowardly that still had the same result. I don't know how to hold that yet, and I have stopped trying to force a conclusion I'm not ready for. Ruth pursued a civil suit simultaneously with the criminal proceedings. The civil case was settled 8 months ago. The settlement recovered most of the stolen funds, plus damages. And because Idaho's Elder Financial Abuse Statute includes provisions for attorney's fees and treble damages in egregious cases, the total recovery was significant. I donated a portion to a legal aid organization in Boise that helps elderly residents who've been victims of financial fraud. My father would have thought that was a reasonable use of the money, though he would not have said so out loud. The house on Orchard Rim Road sold in the spring. Paula Reyes finished the bathroom renovation beautifully. The tile is clean and even and looks nothing like the water-damaged mess that was there before. On the last walkthrough, I stood in the doorway of that bathroom for a while and looked at the wall where the document bag had been sitting for. We don't know exactly how long. At least a year. Probably more. My father had put it there himself, alone, on some afternoon when he had decided he needed to hide what he knew somewhere would survive him. He had not told me. He had not called anyone. He had written careful notes in a pocket notebook and hidden them in a wall, and trusted that eventually someone would find them and know what to do. The notebook is in a drawer in my home office now. I have read it many times. There is a line near the end, before the entries about the supplements, that I think about often. He wrote, "I have spent most of my life believing that the worst thing you can do to someone is accuse them of something they didn't do. Now I am sitting here trying to figure out if believing that has made me easy to take advantage of. I think there is a difference between being trusting and being unwilling to see. I'm not sure I've known the difference my whole life." My father was a man who drove a 2009 Ford F-150 until it had 240,000 miles on it because he didn't trust car salespeople. He never in his life left a restaurant without checking the bill. He spent 30 years working on a loading dock, and then 20 more doing exactly what he said he would do in retirement, which was as little as possible. He was not a naive man, but he had believed that the people closest to him were who they presented themselves to be, and that belief had cost him something he couldn't get back. I think about the notebook in the wall. I think about my father, at 76 or 77, alone in the house on Orchard Rim Road, getting the document bag from wherever he bought it, cutting the drywall himself, screwing the bracket into the stud with hands that had started to shake a little, setting the bag in there, and closing it back up. Not calling me, not calling Derek, not because he didn't need help, but because he wasn't sure who he could trust with what he suspected, and he decided that the safest thing was to leave the evidence where it couldn't be tampered with and hope that someone who loved him would eventually find it. He was right about that. I did find it, and I want to say something to whoever is listening to this who has an older parent, a father, a mother, anyone who lives alone and manages their own finances and has an advisor or a caretaker or a family member involved in any part of their financial life. Get curious about the details. Not suspicious, not paranoid, but curious. Ask to see the statements. Ask who has access. Ask the questions that feel awkward to ask, the ones that seem like you're implying something bad about someone you trust. My father would have told me it was none of my business. He was a private man, and I would have backed off. I have thought 100 times about the conversation I could have had with him. The one where I sat down with the quarterly statements and said, "Dad, let's just look at this together." He would have been annoyed. I would have been embarrassed, and maybe I would have seen the missing clause in the contract. Maybe he would have let me. I didn't have that conversation because I assumed that if something were wrong, he would tell me. He didn't tell me because he was trying to protect me. That is the part of all of this I come back to most often. Not the fraud, not the supplement, not the arrest, not my brother's face when the detective called. All of that is real, and all that mattered. But the part that stays with me is a 77-year-old man, sick and frightened and methodically taking notes and choosing to handle it alone because he loved his sons and didn't want to destroy the relationship between them before he was sure. He left me a note. He left me the evidence. He left me the work to do. I am doing it. There is something I have come back to again and again in the months since all of this came to light. My father was not a careless man. He checked restaurant bills. He kept his truck running for 240,000 miles because he didn't trust people who smiled too easily and talked too fast. And still, it happened to him. That used to feel like a contradiction to me. Now I think it was something else entirely. What Darnell didn't work because my father was foolish. It worked because my father was loyal. He trusted slowly and then completely. And once he had decided a person was trustworthy, he extended that judgment forward without revisiting it. That's not stupidity. That's what most of us do with the people we let into our lives. The problem is that there are people who understand exactly how that works, and they use it deliberately. Darnell had 9 years to study my father, 9 years to learn what Roy Marsh responded to. What made him feel respected? What would make him hesitate before questioning something that seemed off? The supplement wasn't random. It was personal. It was wrapped in the language of concern, of one man looking out for another. That's the part I find hardest to look at directly, not the theft, but the care with which it was constructed. And Derek. I've turned that over more times than I can count. I don't think my brother is a monster. I think he needed money, and someone he trusted made it sound like a small thing. A harmless thing, something that would even out. I think he told himself a story that let him not look too closely. People do that. I have done versions of it myself. Not with anything like this, but in smaller ways, in moments where looking closely at something uncomfortable would have required me to act, and I chose not to look. The difference between what Derek did and what most of us do in our worst moments is mostly one of scale and consequence. That doesn't excuse it. It just means I can't make him entirely a stranger to me, and that has its own kind of weight to carry. What I keep returning to is my father alone in that house, sick and frightened, cutting drywall and screwing a bracket into a stud, doing it methodically and without telling anyone, because he had decided that the most important thing he could do was preserve the truth intact. He didn't know if anyone would ever find it. He didn't know if the evidence would be enough. He did it anyway, because he believed that reality should be documented and that the people who loved him deserved to know what had actually happened, even if he wasn't there to explain it. That is a kind of courage that doesn't look like courage from the outside. It looks like a quiet man going about his business in a house that was slowly making him sicker, but inside it was something harder. The decision to keep your eyes open when closing them would be easier, to act on what you know instead of what you wish were true, to do the painstaking work of gathering evidence even when you're exhausted, and even when you're afraid of what the evidence might cost you. I think about what it would mean to live with that kind of clarity. Not suspicion. My father wasn't a suspicious man, and I don't want to become one, but the willingness to look carefully at what's in front of you, to trust your own observations, to take the uncomfortable question seriously instead of letting it go, because asking it might make things awkward. That is what I want to take from all of this. Not fear, not a closed fist, just clear eyes. He left me that, hidden in a wall, in a fireproof bag, in his careful handwriting. I intend to keep it.